Hi, friends, and welcome to Mystic Bloom, the podcast where modern mysticism meets feminine embodiment. I'm your host, Jenny Scholl, founder of Mystic Bloom, and fiercely devoted to helping women reclaim their sacred power, align with divine wisdom, and embody the fullness of who they are. Together, we'll explore spirituality, sacred alignment, and the art of living in flow with your feminine truth. This is a sanctuary for transformation and a safe space for spiritual exploration. I'm so glad you're here. Hi there, and welcome back to Mystic Bloom, your sanctuary for spiritual exploration and mystical awakening. If you're new to the podcast, you're joining us in the middle of our Mystic Advent series. So each week we've been diving into the traditional and the mystical themes of Advent, blending the ancient Christian teachings with a more mystic, personal, universal approach within spirituality. This week, we step into the third theme of Advent, which is joy. Joy is one of the most beautiful and transformational energies we can embody. And today we're going to explore its deeper meaning, how we can cultivate in our lives, and give a little historical background to joy in the Christmas Christian story and joy as it pertains to Advent. This week marks a shift in the Advent season. So the first 2 weeks, hope and peace reflect on preparation. This week invites us more into celebration. Also, in a physical shift, the candle color in the traditional Christian Advent wreath for the past 2 weeks was purple. The candle for this week is pink. It's the only pink candle in the traditional Christian Advent wreath, and it symbolizes joy, warmth, and renewal. It has a softer tone, a lighter tone, signifying a moment of lightness and delight amidst the anticipation. Right? We're still in the sacred waiting. We're still in the hope. We're still in the peace. And we're also in joy. The changing of the color, it's a visual reminder to lift our spirits and embrace the joy that comes from the nearness of the divine light, right? Like it's coming. We can be joyful as we're in this season of sacred waiting. So in the Christian tradition, joy, the joy of this week, is rooted in the promise of the coming Messiah. The readings and the prayers for this week are often reflected in the Christmas story with the words of the angel to the shepherds. The angel announces the birth of Jesus to shepherds in the fields near Bethlehem. Often used in these teachings are the words of Luke 2:10-11. I'll read them now. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord." Great joy, right? So there's a few things even just within these 2 verses that I want to touch on. One is oftentimes in the biblical teaching, when an angel appears and an angel speaks, they say, "Do not be afraid." Because probably just like today, if an angel appeared and manifested in front of you, there might be some shock and there might be some fear. So I love, again and again, it says, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." like I've come here to tell you something important. It immediately like calms them. And as we spoke about in the last episode, this was a time for the people of great turmoil. The Jews of this time, they longed for the liberation from the Roman rule, from Herod the king. There was a lot of oppression, heavy taxation. He really focused on the elite, and the common people bore the brunt of that. And so this was a time when they were praying, they were waiting, they're in anticipation, and now they are in joy that a Messiah would be born. It's also significant that the angel decided to speak this to the shepherd. So during this time in first century Jewish society, the shepherds were of a low social status. They were often seen as unclean because they worked with animals. And because they were unclean, they were not allowed in many religious rituals and in temple, which is kind of ironic and a topic for another day, but ritual nature to me is so much of ritual. And so these shepherds that are with the movements of nature and animals, it's just kind of funny. Like there's spiritual and there's ritual in that, right? And yet they were not allowed in the religious temples and the religious rituals because they were quote unquote unclean. Yet they were central to the whole economy running because they cared for the flocks that provided food, they provided wool, and the sheep were used for sacrifices for the temple. Anyway, we could go into that later, that these dear people who were so in tune with those animals that were used for sacrifice, but were not allowed in. However, back to the story, the announcement of Jesus' birth to the shepherd is significant because it aligns with the biblical theme of God choosing humble and the overlooked and the people's people, right? Like Jesus was a people's guy. And it echoes the earlier figures in Jewish history, such as King David in the town of David, such as King David, who was a shepherd before being anointed king. So there's a lot of threads and themes here, including the city of David, Bethlehem. That itself has deep symbolic importance. This was the birthplace of King David, Israel's greatest king, the prophesied location for the Messiah's birth, right? Back in Micah, in that book, they announced, or they prophesied rather, that a Messiah would be born in the kingdom of David, in the city of David. And the narrative ties him to David's royal lineage. So the fact that Yeshua, that Jesus of Nazareth, right? He grew up in Nazareth, was born in Bethlehem, the city of David, is part of this prophecy, is part of the lineage. And it's one of those things where like all the dots had to connect, right? Like Herod was causing a census, and part of that census is that the men and their families had to return to their birthplace in order to be counted. And Yeshua's earthly father, Joseph, took Mary, a very pregnant Mother Mary, on the donkey. This is how the story goes. And at the time of the birth, they could find no place but a manger surrounded by the animals, a modest town in Bethlehem, the city of David, where the prophecy said that Yeshua was to be born, or rather that the Messiah was to be born. And therefore, Yeshua was fulfilling the prophecy. It also is like a small, modest town, Bethlehem, at this point. So the fact that he was laid in a manger, visited by shepherds, the angel came to the shepherd saying, "Do not be afraid. I bring you great news of great joy," in a time where joy was greatly needed. Greatly needed. And includes that this joy is for all the people. That really emphasizes the universal significance of this birth. that this is for all of humanity, everyone. So again, in this time, I always think it's so helpful to know the context. The Jewish people are living under Roman rule. They are burdened by poverty. They are longing for freedom. And the angel's announcement of great joy would have been a profound message of hope. It pointed to a different kind of kingdom, one that is rooted in love, one that is rooted in justice and divine peace, rather than conquest and oppression, which in itself is a reason for great joy. So bringing this into today's world, into a more mystical inner joy, this narrative is a reminder that joy can be a spiritual practice. It invites us to look beyond the circumstances and connect with the divine light that brings hope, peace, and joy. So just as the shepherds received the news with awe and wonder, we too are called to embrace the joy of divine presence, trusting in its power to transform our lives, to transform the world. The shepherds, when they received the news from the angel, nothing in their immediate circumstances had changed, right? They were still under Roman rule. For all intents and purposes, a baby had been born. It would be years. Yeshua's true teachings didn't really take off and take notice. It's really when he was between the ages of 30 and 33. Yet, the fact that this divine light had come to earth, that the prophecy was being fulfilled, was enough for that great joy. The plan was unfolding, which is something that we can really take to heart today. Even in the midst of circumstances, even if nothing changes immediately in the external, can we have great joy in the divine unfolding? Can we have great joy that there is the divine spark, that there are things working in our favor, that it doesn't have to be dependent on circumstances or outcome, but the process itself. And when we align with our true nature and remember our connection to the divine, we can be in joy. We can be in joy and in awe. I think awe is one of the most incredible flavors of joy. To me, they're intertwined with nature, with the sunset, with a flower, gratitude, acts of kindness. Joy is beautiful because it can actually be attached to a lot of different emotions, right? We can have a heartfelt emotion. We can feel love, we can feel longing, and we can feel joy. It is this deep knowing that divine grace is always present. It is something that we can continue to return to find joy in each and every moment. Can we open ourselves up to fully experience what is happening? Can we open ourselves up to the beauty and to the grace and to the joy? I also believe that gratitude is greatly connected to joy. And gratitude is one of the most powerful practices for inviting joy. To taking time each day to notice the gifts in your life, both big and small. Because when we shift our focus to what we are thankful for, joy naturally follows. And scientifically, our reticular activating system will begin to pick up more joy, more gratitude. So when we can create the space for what is, that's where I believe we can really connect to joy. When we can release expectation of how something is supposed to, in air quotes, supposed to go, we can be in joy. If those shepherds in that field had a very rigid view of how this was all supposed to go down, maybe they thought it was supposed to be in the year, maybe it was supposed to be someone who was ruling in a castle and not born in a manger, right? Like if they had a very rigid view, they would not have been able to experience the joy of that moment. So as you celebrate this week of Advent in whichever way you so choose, whether it's lighting a candle, whether it's doing the meditation, whether it's reflecting, I invite you to contemplate how you cultivate joy as an act of devotion. Where is joy already present? And perhaps we just need to remove patterns and conditionings of our own to be able to touch it. What are times in your life that you have felt most joyful? And how can you invite more of that energy in? So as we journey through this third week of Advent, may you find moments to pause, to reflect, and to rejoice. To remember that joy is not something that you have to search for, that it is already within you, a divine gift waiting to be uncovered. And let that light of that pink candle or anything pink or bright or vibrant remind you of joy, to embrace the warmth and the sweetness, trusting in the divine grace that flows through all things. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of Mystic Bloom. If you'd like to dive deeper into the Advent theme, you can download the Mystic Advent Guide in the show notes or on the website. May joy guide your steps this week, and may it remind you of the divine light that resides within. And I'll see you next week for the fourth theme of Advent, which is love.